pledge allegiance to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. I didn't get it.
As many as you'd like. Brian absent, Dan Filippo absent, Hardy,
Here.
Carsonson,
Here.
Madigan,
Here.
Turner,
Here.
Chairwoman Henning.
Here. Announcements and correspondence.
Madam Chairperson, I have no announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Garrigan. We need a motion for the approval of the June 7th Planning and Zoning Board meeting minutes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Hardy,
Yes.
Carsonson,
Yes.
Madigan,
Yes.
Turner,
Abstain.
Henning.
Abstain.
Motion.
The motion carries. If you abstain on a vote, that goes with the majority and it carries through.
Thank you, sir. Now we move on to public comments. Is there anyone that has a public comment that they'd like to express? Okay, Mr. Garrigan, new business and old business.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairperson. As you recall, at the last meeting, there was a continuance of two cases which were old business. There were two special uses for two different cannabis dispensaries. We did go through the findings of facts for a special use. I'll go through those again very briefly. But it was determined at that point, we also determined that both applicants did require a variance application. So since our last meeting, staff has been working with both applicants for both cannabis dispensaries on two variances. So I'm going to go through each variance report. So our first case, Madam Chairperson, I'll let the record reflect that this is a variance case number 2307, being heard in accordance with public notice in all state statutes and applicable ordinances. This matter comes before you for a variance for the properties known as 453 and 471 Main Street. As you recall, the applicant is proposing a dispensary at this location. For context, properties located on Main Street, across from the street of the packing house. The applicant, as you recall, is proposing a temporary cannabis facility and a permanent cannabis facility. This property is surrounded by generally light industrial uses. The property itself, for the record, is currently zoned M1. As you well know, whenever you do a variance analysis, it's also important to look at the surrounding uses with regards to context. So again, the general character of this area is light industrial, consistent with the current M1 zoning. There are certain standards that the applicant must demonstrate for a variance. So I'm going to walk through each variance as part of my staff report, and the applicant will have to demonstrate that they've complied with the majority of the required standards. For the first standard for any variance is the variance is in harmony with the general purposes and the intent of the zoning ordinance. Again, the applicant is seeking a variance from the 1,000-foot buffer. As you recall, when the cannabis ordinance was adopted back in 2019, generally, the village followed the general state standards which highlight a 1,000-foot buffer. So we incorporated a 1,000-foot buffer from any cannabis dispensary from certain defined uses. So those uses as incorporated on the actual ordinance include private nursery schools, preschools, primary or secondary schools, licensed child care facilities, public park, public library, recreational center, or arcade. Other one than licensed as to operate a video gaming. Based on the fact we discussed that there is an existing child care facility in the subdivision of Oakwood Knolls within 1,000 feet of the proposed permanent proposed cannabis facility at the subject site, the applicant would require a variance. And based on that fact, they're seeking relief this evening for a variance for relief from that 1,000-foot buffer. So based on that, we would propose a proposed location of this dispensary is approximately 700 feet from the existing single-family home within the Oakwood Knolls subdivision. As you recall, when the original development of Mr. Sunday came in for this subject property, when I'm talking about actually the proposed permanent home, or the property commonly known as 453 Main Street, there was a proposed plan unit development, which did incorporate extensive landscaping throughout the property and also buffering from those residential homes. But as we speak, there is currently no fencing along the adjacent eastern property line. There's no extensive new buffering. There is a fair amount of mature trees in the area, which I believe the applicant, at least on a temporary basis, or I'm sorry, the owner of the property has no immediate plans to remove. But based on that fact, based on the 700-foot buffer area that currently exists, we would believe that the general proposed cannabis facility, both the actual permanent facility located at 453 and the temporary cannabis facility at 471, would have no negative direct impact on the overall harmony of the single-family homes located to the west, subject to the additional buffering that the applicant has agreed to do. Applicants we've agreed to do is also agreed to incorporate a privacy fence along the eastern perimeter of their property to provide some additional buffering along with some additional landscaping. So with those subject improvements, we would submit that the applicant has met the first finding of fact that's required for any variance. Second finding of fact for a variance is the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances, and the strict enforcement of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties or impose exceptional hardships. Based on this finding, we would submit, Madam Chairperson, there's nothing inherently unique about this property. The applicant, in some ways, there's really no, with the proposed hardship, there's really no unique hardship in this property. Obviously, the applicant theoretically could have certain types of different uses. If the 1,000-foot buffer was specifically restricted in a very restrictive manner, obviously this proposed use could not be used or operated in subject property. But based on this one finding of fact, we do not believe that there's any unique hardship or unique circumstances which would make this property unique or some type of unique hardship based on this finding of fact. The third finding of fact is the proposed property cannot yield a reasonable use if permitted only under conditions allowed by the zoning ordinance. As I've already highlighted, if we incorporate a restrictive interpretation of the 1,000-foot buffer, this applicant could not use this property for a cannabis dispensary based on the approximate distance between the proposed facility and the existing child care facility within Oakwood Knolls. But as I've already highlighted, we believe that there, with sufficient buffering, the existing 700-foot separation between these two uses and existing mature landscaping of this property, we do not believe that there will be any type of direct negative impact on this single-family home with a child care based on the 700-foot distance between the proposed applicant's uses and the existing child care facility, along with the additional improvements which the applicant has agreed to regards to fencing, additional landscaping. We would submit that the applicant would mitigate any type of negative impact on that single-family home with the child care facility. The last finding of fact is required for a variance. The variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the facility, of the area, or locality of the area, and will not substantially be a detriment to the surrounding properties. Again, as I've already highlighted, with the existing distance of approximately 700 feet, with the proposed additional buffering, with the additional fencing, there should be absolutely no negative impact on the existing child care facility located on Lakewood Drive. More importantly, as I highlighted, as you'll recall, when we reviewed the special use, the main access point towards the facility is actually on Main Street. There will be no, obviously, any type of access that will come through the Oakwood Knoll subdivision to this proposed development. The main entrance of this, both the permanent facility and also the temporary facility are directed towards Route 83. So that we would believe that would minimize or mitigate any type of negative impact on the single-family homes located within Oakwood Knoll subdivision. Again, the proposed use I've already highlighted is generally consistent with the light industrial and commercial nature. There are a number of commercial businesses along the Route 83 corridor, but mostly light industrial, specifically mostly storage facilities. And the area is somewhat, the character of the area, as I've already highlighted, is somewhat depressed. We talked in long-term about a long-term plan to rejuvenate and bring in new investment in along the corridor and make on Route 83. It is a gateway into our downtown from the state of Wisconsin. This proposed applicant's new building, a new investment in the overall site would be the first step for the long-term improvement of this corridor. So again, we believe the applicant has complied or met this last fourth required finding of fact. So based on our analysis, our recommendation this evening, Madam Chairperson, is a proposed variance for 453 and 471 Main Street will have no negative impact on the surrounding properties. And the proposed use is generally consistent with the existing trend of development and the general character of the area. So we are making a favorable recommendation this evening for the proposed variance for the properties commonly known as 453 and 471 Main Street. And with that, I'll conclude my staff report and be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Garrigan. Mr. Mc,
Applicant's also here this evening, just for the record.
okay, thank you. Mr. McCarty?
So we're at about 700 feet from the childcare facility, which is over in Oakwood Knolls, which has an entrance off of North Avenue, and we're entering this property off of Main Street. The temporary facility that's been requested is not part of this variance at this time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it is for the record, both addresses.
So the time frame then on the temporary facility, what are we looking at in time frame for the temporary facility to be in place? And when do we anticipate they would be making their move over to the permanent facility in the new building?
I'm going to allow the applicant, Mr. Weber, for the record to answer that question.
Hello, Steve Weber, representing Consume.
Mr. Weber, one second. Mr. Garrigan, we are at a public hearing, correct? Okay. I'm going to swear everybody in. Madam Chair, do you want to swear everyone in, or would you like me to do that?
You may go ahead.
Thank you. Anyone planning on giving testimony before this board tonight, please raise your right hand. Prepare to be sworn. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. You are sworn.
Steve Weber with PTS Consume. So in regards to the temporary trailer, assuming that, everything goes forward, we would have the trailer would be in place in about 3 weeks after approval. And then right away, the new construction would start on the new building, which could take 4 to 5 months, and then we'll move into the new building.
Pending permits.
Yes.
So 3 to 4 weeks, 4 to 5. Okay, so you're looking at about 5 to 8 months?
No longer than, yes, you can say that. I mean, I would want to be out of the temporary before the winter time for sure.
Okay, can you give me a date that we can call the end of the use for the temporary building? And if it goes beyond that, you have to then come before us for an extension?
This is assuming that on the 12th, potentially this could get approved. I'm trying to forecast, trying to make some predictions here. It's
Yeah, let's call it next month.
next month. So, I mean, I would say, okay. Six months from the 12th of July.
And that would be. We'll be into January. Okay. 12th of January. So can we have a midnight date tied to this, 12th of January, and if it has not concluded or started, or something has gone wrong, or or miss, we can stop the temporary use and or extend it based on the position of the construction.
Absolutely. The chair asked me to address that question. Mr. Garrigan, correct me if I'm wrong. But in the state of Illinois, conditions can be appended to both variances and special uses. Those conditions are oftentimes keyed to real estate waste, meaning we want to make sure that things are up and running and that we are moving with in an expeditious manner. And the board has actually considered this in a different context of having a sunset provision on all special use permits. So this is similar to what the board is going through. So long with only a lawyer can answer a yes or no question with a paragraph. So yes, Commissioner, you can append a timeline of 6 months on this variance. I may have actually come back, Mr. Garrigan, Madam Chair, and ask for conditions as well on the variance if it proceeds.
Okay, so that's one of the conditions that I would be looking for to be on there to protect our interests in the land use so that it is being used in its proper setting. You have stated that the temporary use building would have to have all security and everything in place as if it was a permanent use building.
That is correct. Per state for compliance, it
Per
has to get
state for
inspected.
compliance.
Yes, sir.
Okay, does that require you to have security on the facility?
Yes.
Thank you. Temporary parking for that is to be used on the current parking lot that's in place right now?
That is correct.
Okay. So you're gonna be bringing in some more additional customers, activity. Are we planning on, and I would have to ask the contractor this, are we planning on fencing off the construction area so that we keep it separated from the public coming into that facility? Okay, gated, locked. Good. That's all I have at this time.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Karstensen.
No questions. I've had some of them similar ones and I want to hear from the public.
Ms. Madigan?
I do have a question. So, Mr. Garrigan, you had said that, this fits within the parameters and working towards that beautification of that corridor. But I did notice driving by it that, there's a lot of like semis and trailers and other storage that's out there. And I know on previous applicants, we've had them put fencing up and screening and additional trees and stuff. With this new project, will that all go away or?
Yeah, well, that's currently with regards to I think you're talking about the property at 471, the current existing building at 471. They do have some storage facilities. So we've been working with the applicant on trying to address that with regards to some of the outdoor storage. As you know, the long-term plans is to make 453 into a business park. So with those improvements, all that temporary storage will go away. But that in some ways it's an ancillary issue that we'll have to work with Mr. Sunday on. It's not really pertaining to this applicant.
Okay.
It's obviously the applicant, it has nothing to do with the current storage of those
Okay.
trailers. That's more of a code enforcement issue.
Okay. Other than that, I, again, would just like to, I agree with Commissioner Carstensen. I'd like to hear from the public a little bit more. Thank you.
Mr. Turner?
So I would say that definitely agree with Commissioner McCarty. I think that it's important to make sure that we set some guidelines around that. I think that was a good idea. Before I hear from the public, I would like to ask just if you could talk a little bit more about the process of the temporary. You said 3 weeks, so I don't know anything about this. So is this trailer essentially already constructed somewhere else? You pull it in, you drop it, you guys are operational day one?
Yes, it'll have to get obviously customized for the state. But yes, when it gets dropped off, it'll be a finished, complete unit that'll go on top of a slab. And then once it does get delivered and everything gets turned on, power gets activated, everything, then the state, at that point, the state needs to, the Department of the IDFPR will have to come out to the facility, inspect it and make sure that everything is 100% compliant. At that point, once it gets inspected, then we get our license number from the state, and then we can begin to operate. But so there's a whole process that has to take place before we can do anything in there.
And I'd imagine this is pretty standard, it sounds like.
Yes, yes. This would be our sixth location in the state, so we're very familiar with the processes. Our most recent store just opened up in March in St. Charles, so this process is something that we're very familiar with.
Okay, understood. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Mr. McCarty?
Have you run a temporary facility at any other locations? This is your first time.
Yes, first time doing a temporary, but at the end of the day, the process is the same as a store. One's just going to be temporary. I mean, everything has to be run identical. There's zero shortcuts.
Ms. Madigan?
So will the fence be installed prior to the temporary building?
The fence would be for the permanent construction that's getting done. So obviously a lot of the site work, that'll all be sectioned off from where the trailer is. There's a whole separate lot that the new construction will be happening on.
Okay. So then no, there won't be a fence behind, okay.
So at this point, if we have some public comments, if someone would like to speak, please come up to the podium. State your name and address, please. Well, they all sworn in.
Okay, I'll swear. No one signed it.
Hi, I'm Darcy Dussault. I am the, yes, I am. Thank you. I manage and own my licensed daycare on Lakewood Drive. And I've been doing this for almost 30 years.
One thing, Madam Chair, if I may just remind everyone that there are people participating via Zoom. So we would ask that everyone speaks into the microphone. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. I just want to make sure.
Not a problem, not a
Thank you.
problem. Do you want me to reintroduce myself? My concern for my licensed daycare is because this was a 1,000-foot variance, and now it is going to be negotiated because of the circumstances of having the dispensary come in. It is my concern with my daycare that it will affect as far as the safety or the well-being of the children. Also the residential area that we're in that abuts up right to the residential. There are thoroughfares as far as our nature, having paths in our woods, and I understand that there is going to be fencing and whatnot along, but it is still a worrisome time for me. As far as my business is concerned too, if future families in my daycare learn of the dispensary, is this going to impact my business?
Does anyone have questions for her? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darcy. Anyone else?
I'm Judy Close, and I'm on Lakewood Drive next to Darcy. And literally, when everything was clear cut in February, when they started, I could see the storage units. I could count the train tracks. I could count the things on 83. I guess my question is, you say in 6 months, are you going to have fencing? Are you going to have vegetation and or landscaping up? Because when all the leaves fall off the trees, it is this bare bones right behind my house. I can be on 83 and see my garage. I can see my backyard. So I guess my thing is, even if you did set 700 feet, is there going to be a decent fence? I know when the storage units were put up a couple doors down from me, the blue and white ones, they were clear cut to the fence. I understand you're not doing that, but nothing was ever put up there. I can see them from my house, however many years later that is. So this is a neighborhood. I've been there for 35 years. And I guess my thing is, I don't want to look out my kitchen window and see a big old building back there. By the way, how many square feet is the building?
Building, again, for the record, the overall permanent building, approximately 9,000 square feet, a little less than half of it, approximately 4,800 square feet, I believe 4,900 square feet will be the proposed cannabis facility. The actual trailer is less than 600 square feet.
Does the trailer go away after the building is permanent? Trailer goes away. Yes.
I'm just going to remind everybody that we are on Zoom tonight. So if you're going to talk, if you could speak into the microphone, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
So my concern, obviously, as a homeowner, is I don't want to see the value of my property go down. It's a struggling neighborhood as it is. And I think we all try to get together and to try to make our properties presentable. And so I guess like I said, I don't want to look out my kitchen window and see a building without what you have guaranteed is decent vegetation. I don't know what that means. Big trees, what kind of fence is there? Because there is a, you know, whatever you call where the power lines go through, and there's 2 transformers right by my house. So there has to be access there. So I guess I would like to be reassured if we're going to go down this road that things, you know, don't take away from our neighborhood feel by putting that there. That would be my comment.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Pam Mozan. I live at 258 Lakewood. I've been there for 42 years. The reason I bought the property is because the woods in the back, and I love it. If you walk through the property right now, there are trails all over from the deer that have now disappeared. One of my issues is I walked back 100 feet the other day, and I've noticed that the property is now raised quite a bit with broken up concrete and blacktop. Is this going to be the parkway for the cars and stuff like that? And there is, in the springtime, we have a drainage problem back there. It's soaking wet. You can't even walk back there. You'll go down in 6 inches of water. Will this push the water level back into our properties? I know 2 houses down, Scott, he's already been flooded twice in the last 15 years and his total garage. I'm worried about this. I'm also worried because I'm 72 years old. There are 3 of us now that are widowed within 6 houses. I think it's a security thing. You know, if you're going to protect the people of Antioch, it should be 1,000 feet. There should not be any variance whatsoever. And I kind of looked into prices on homes. In Colorado, it hasn't gone down. In Boston and different places, it has gone down 5 to 10%. I've lived here for 42 years. I've taken care of my house, and I don't want to lose the value of my home. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the other commission, Ms. Carstensen, did you have anything you wanted to hear from the public? Anything else?
I like the idea of more vegetation. Maybe it could be some evergreens to protect these folks. I think folks on this board know that I'm in favor of making these variances. And I think maybe I'll just explain a little why. I'd like there to be some additional financial revenue streams for our village. Cause I agree. I live near Oakwood Knolls and I ride my bike through there. I love that neighborhood. I grew up here and that's the neighborhood my cousins lived in. I have a hard time accepting the fact that we have a million bars in this town and those never take any shade. But granting this variance gets a lot of heat. I don't know if there's any other available properties, Michael, that any of these folks could look at, if that's even an option. So, yeah, I don't know.
Thank you. Ms. Madigan, do you have anything else?
I do. Michael, has that area off of 83, has that always been zoned the way it is now?
The property has, to my best of my knowledge, the property has been M1 zoning, light industrial for many, many years. As you know, it's one of our larger concentrations of light industrial. There's a few areas that are commercial, packing house with commercial, but most of the area along between North Avenue and the Wisconsin border has been zoned M1. It's one of the areas that the village board decided that it would be appropriate for special use for cannabis dispensaries. We don't have that many M1 areas. As you know, one of the challenges is that we have so many areas which are within 1,000 feet of either a child care facility or daycare or school, that finding locations for cannabis dispensaries have been challenging. We have a map. We actually been working with applicants for some time, and they have been challenging finding locations that you have the right zoning and within that 1,000-foot buffer, outside the 1,000-foot buffer. So when you ask other areas, there is some limitation on how many areas are available.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, so my in-laws live on Lakewood Drive as well. And, I think that it's to what Commissioner Mike, Mr. Garrigan just said, it's tough with 1,000 feet. Try to, the way the crow flies, try to find a spot, available land that you're not going to run into one of those areas within, the village of Antioch. And I do agree with Commissioner Carsonson. Basically, it's tough. We have bars and gambling everywhere. And this is one of those things that I think is unique, will bring a lot of tax dollars to the town. And this specific scenario here, if it shared an entrance to the neighborhood and or had some type of, flow or traffic impact, I could get on board with it. But I think that just because it is the 83 corridor, to me, it's nowhere near the actual property of the neighborhood itself. I mean, I would be in favor of this. I would say though that, it was interesting comments from the people that spoke that live on Lakewood Drive, the flooding, the clear cut of the trees, winter, you lose the leaves. So I would like to see, and I know that there is a pretty substantial, whatchamacallit, landscape plan, but the fence scenario, Michael, do you think you could talk a little bit more about fence, when it's constructed, where it's going to be, so everyone can.
So you can see there's a landscape plan, and we discussed this at the special use, and I'll go into more detail when we talk about the special use that the applicant still has to come before
Understood.
this evening. But you can see very briefly that there is an extensive landscape plan. The applicant does, as part of the original plan, is proposing what's supposed to be a security fence. I think my staff report did request that it be basically a privacy fence, and there'd be some additional landscaping along the eastern perimeter behind the building. So the back of the building would not be visible from not only the residents, but also any future light industrial development that happens as part of this overall PUD. Remember, this is a PUD, and as you recall, there were supposed to be several other new buildings behind this proposed building. This is the first phase. This 9,000 square foot building is the first phase of a proposed light industrial park. So there will be other light industrial buildings behind this building. So there would be a privacy fence plus landscaping, which would buffer those buildings, which would provide additional buffer to the residences when those buildings are developed.
Okay, thank you for that. I have nothing further.
Okay, and then I have a few questions, but go ahead, Mr. McCarty. I'd like to hear from you.
You started with this first.
No, sorry.
All right, the back building offset on the back of the property is how far? 30? 25, 30 feet?
So at least a minimum of 30 feet. You're talking about the actual setbacks and everything.
The setback
Right.
on the back side of the property for Oakwood Knolls,
Correct.
so 30 feet. And do we have detailed plantings for the 30 feet? We don't.
Those would come in when the concurrent with development comes in. I mean, we could add, to be fair, we could add a stipulation that, that landscaping be planted, concurrent with this first phase, that, but typically that would come in when the last phase or when that building develops,
But the fence will be in prior to.
the fence will be incorporated in this overall,
In this.
as part of the site plan.
Okay, so to be transparent. The storage facility that's just north of there was mine. I built it. All of these properties in that area, M1 zoning has been in place for over 35 years or more. Everybody's known the zoning for what's behind their properties for the possibility of something to be built, unfortunately. The worst case scenario is you can have an asphalt processing plant there. It's the truth because that's available under M1 zoning. We know that by the available uses. You can have a concrete crushing plant. You could have a bunch of other things that can be there in that area. So the things that we can do under this circumstances, because it's a variance, is try to protect the homeowners as much as we can with fencing, with vegetation, with a zone that helps keep it as harmonious for you as it could possibly be. The use that's there that we're asking for is a kind of a retail use. I went down to Graves Lake, Round Lake Beach, the new facility that's there, and sat there for 3 hours and just watched the activity, the people, the cars, what was happening. If there was anything that was really out of the ordinary. It was less use than what you'd see going to Walgreens. It was relatively quiet, very easy. People would pull up, they'd walk in, they'd do their business, they'd come out, they'd get in their car and they'd go home. I didn't see anything like we would have with, like we have in our local bars, restaurants, and other things in our current situation in the community right now. Relatively low impact. There are other communities in our area that have a 500-foot buffer zone. That's been considered and we've talked about it. The 1,000-foot buffer zone, especially from corner of lot line to anything, I don't think we'd ever be able to put a facility in anywhere in Antioch currently. So it should be considered from the front door or back door of the facility. And I think 500 feet would be very acceptable for what this is putting forward for our community in use and low impact for retail. Unfortunately, that space has been there for a long time, but fortunately, we have the opportunity to try to buffer you as much as possible. The only thing I would suggest on that east side of that property line is more evergreen type plantings, taller, faster growing, arborvitaes, things that can help keep a buffer between them and that space for years to come.
You can add that stipulation as long as the stipulations are consistent with the variance and special use.
It was required for us to do arborvitaes for the storage facility. I would suggest that we keep something very common to that. So evergreens for that space. So
Can I ask the commissioner something, Madam Chair? You have microphone. You have no financial interest in the property at this point in time, correct?
I have no financial interest in the property at this time, nor the property that was put in place for the storage facility
Thank you.
that's been sold.
All right, well, thank you. We have someone else who would like to do a public comment. Please come up to the podium, state your name and your address.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Lindstrom from 384 North Main Street. I'm across the street from the facility. It's great you people are all up here with the ideas, the privacy fences, the trees, the evergreens. I've got the Metro behind me, and I know you don't want to hear this, Mike. I've asked for years now about lighting. There's 7 high mast lights back there to no help at all, a couple of shades. But we're putting a whole community, a whole subdivision in some kind of I'm not going to call it a guessing game. I know everybody knows what they're doing, we talk about privacy fences. They put a privacy fence behind me. It's a slatted little Menards fence. It's things like that. So this is very key to the people over in Oakwood Knolls, in my opinion, that we're not doing something here and it's in, and now it's in to stay, and there's not going to be any help for the people all along the rear of that building or things like that. It's something I'm a little nervous about from my past history, and I'm trying to still, hopefully you folks could help me in that matter too, about these high mast lights. It's not so bad now with the leaves. The winter time, it's lit up like a football field. And I know it's a different, I had to take it up with Metro, and I know it's all different, but these are things that might happen as we progress in this area over there.
Thank you, and we understand that, but tonight
I understand,
what we're
ma'am. Yes,
addressing
ma'am.
is the variance for this property. And we do know, we have heard, I do believe you've been here before. And
Yes,
we've
ma'am.
heard about the lighting.
Sure.
And it is difficult to deal with Metra. And I certainly understand that, and we do. But at this point right now, we have to get on with the meeting about.
I
what's on
understand. I'm
the
sorry to
agenda.
take up the time,
No,
but
that's
but
okay.
there's always
No.
a
We value everyone's opinion, but we just need to
You're right.
move on because we can't talk about the lighting right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else that has public comment? Okay. At this point, I'll give you 2 minutes, okay?
Take that.
Okay, and
So when somebody said that the variance now was 30 feet.
you need to state your name again. ma'am.
Oh, Judy Close, Lakewood Drive, right behind the property. So that being said, where it's been clear cut up to now, and there's a few big trees which have filled in, are you saying those trees are going to stay there? Or are you saying those trees are coming down, then you have 700 feet or 500 feet? Because that is crucial, because those oaks have been there for hundreds of years. They provide a lot of shade in the neighborhood, my backyard, among other things. But if you're just talking about going from the 30 feet out and taking all of that down, putting up a fence and some arborvitae's, then that's not even fair shake for the property values. That's the way I see it. Been there a long time, seen other stuff happen. You know, I wouldn't trust it. If you're leaving everything that's there right now behind our properties, that's one thing. But if you're planning on going to the fence line, cutting everything down, and then telling me that you're only going to go 500 or 700 feet back and plant some little shrubs, leave the tall oaks, leave those beautiful trees there, and I'd be good with that.
Okay, thank you.
Troy Sunday, property owner. I guess. Yeah, I swear. Yep. I think when I got approved for the building 2 years ago, I think some of the neighbors were at the time, they wanted me to leave a buffer. So I guess a natural tree buffer. So I don't know what you guys want, if you want a natural tree buffer or you want us to clear cut it. So I guess, because she keeps talking about the clearing's not my property. It's been cleared. That's next door to me. A lot of people think it's my property. It's not my property. It's been cleared. And then also where they all have fences on the back of their houses touching my property, and some are actually on my property along with a couple sheds, but we can talk about that later. But other than that, if they want, I mean, I guess what you guys want, if you want natural trees, it can be natural trees. If you want fences and arborvitae's, it can be, you know, I guess I've heard it both ways. So I guess that's what we'll stand up for, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sunday. I do have a couple of questions. First of all, we're still talking about the 700 versus 1,000 and granting the variance for that. And my opinion is that when you have a child care facility that's been operating that long, and now you're going to grant a variance, I understand from their perspective, not only you know, from their perspective with business and that, but can you lose business from that? And I understand that that can be a concern. It can be a big concern. What I would want to see is a natural buffer. I also would want, I would want the ladies to come back when the plan is set, and they can take a look as well at what plants are going in and what's going to happen. I'd like to see that they're involved in that in some way. And I'm just not sold on changing it from 1,000 feet. I know that you say there's not a lot of places in Antioch, but you know what? The bars and everything were here. This is a whole new world. So I think we have to be extremely cautious on that. And I have a couple questions for Mr. Weber. So you would need to get cleared from IDOT an entrance to the property. Do you know how long that would take?
Currently, there's paperwork in from the developers already communicated with IDOT or from when it was approved before. Keep in mind, there was a building that was already approved. We would just be a tenant in half of that.
So you have that paperwork?
I do not have the paperwork. The developer, he has started the process. There's been communication with IDOT.
Okay, so it's not approved yet. There's just paperwork. Has it been submitted to IDOT?
Yes.
Okay. And when did you submit that?
2 years ago it was submitted, and then just with COVID, we haven't moved forward with it, but then I have my engineer working on it right now. And I have emails today from talking about it, so.
So you've talked with the state?
Correct. I did.
Okay. And what has the state said to you?
They were worried about some calculations, water detention calculations, and that was really about it. But also, since 2 years ago, I purchased 471 Main Street that already has an 83. So both have an 83 access. The 471 access just needs to be widened right now for commercial use because there was a house there before. So there already is access on both properties.
And another. Okay. So you expect approval then within, you said, from IDOT?
Whatever it takes to get back. Yeah, a couple months. It should be pretty quick because I already had emails with them regarding it before.
But my understanding with the state is it can take a while.
It can, yeah, but we should be able to get around that.
And how will you get around it?
Well, talking to some of the people in the village, that as long as we have communication showing that they're approving it, they'll give us permits to start building.
Mr. McCarty?
You currently have an entrance off of 83.
Correct. It's just the widening.
Okay.
And I have on 471 Main Street, I do have a DOT approved, so I can grant myself access to my other property off of that.
They will be
also.
connected, won't they?
Correct.
So that would be your temporary access.
Correct. And then the one that I'm in for is on 471, just to widen the one that I have now. So I have two facilities there already.
They already have access and it is.
I understand, but you need a stamp of approval too from the state that he's working at. And so I'm asking how long that would be, because how long would that hold things up for them? The other question I have is on the trailer. So on the trailer, it's 600 square feet?
That is correct.
Okay, so in the 600 square feet, I mean, if you're looking at, and how big is the permanent building?
It's going to be 4,900.
4,900. How much business can you do in 600 feet on a trailer?
Well, it would be very limited as far as the SKUs and stuff like that. I don't know that we would operate the same hours either. I mean, it would be a way scaled down
Okay.
version.
And so like what hours are you thinking that it would be?
Well, I mean, currently the stores are open from 9 to 9.
Okay.
We'd have to really address it once we got in there. I would say 9 to 9 initially, but because of the size, this is not something that we're going to promote at all. It's just going to kind of be there, and people show up, they show up, because the end goal is obviously to be into the permanent building. I want to be in the temporary the least amount of time possible.
Okay. And you say the permanent building would be about 6 months.
That, as of now, that would be my best guess.
Okay. And then, and how long for all the permits and stuff before you could start construction?
Well, a lot of it hinges on, you know, we have to, everything has to get the approvals first. Yes, but the building has already been approved prior.
Correct. Okay. Okay. Um, and you think there's enough business to promote 2 dispensaries in Antioch?
That would be that'd be something I would be saying personally as far as how I feel about the business from knowing about it. But as far as this particular issue, I think we're gonna be getting more into that later on. I mean, but
Okay.
everyone runs their business differently. Everyone has different operating costs. We have stores in Michigan where there's multiple stores in town and a lot of them are closing down. I just mentioned that we have opened up our most recent store in St. Charles. St. Charles ordinance allows 2, and there's 33,000 people that live there.
Correct.
Their variance is there is 250 feet. Obviously, it's a more densely populated area, but as far as variances go, I've seen them from 1,000 to 750 to 500 to 250. Obviously, this is special use, so each area is very unique. Each town is very unique. That's why
I'm
taken on a
aware.
case-by-case basis. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And would you, for the ladies here or the residents here, would you just quickly explain what it is when you walk into a dispensary?
When you walk into a dispensary, this will be the most least impactful, most secure facility that you have ever been in. There will be security that check IDs once you come inside. The people that are, and if you've never been in a dispensary, it's hard to explain, but inside you have a reception desk where they check your ID. Everyone is very professional. These stores have approximately 20 full-time employees that get paid very well with benefits. It's a very professionally run operation all the way through. It has to be per the state. There can be 0 loss in the store. There could be everything. The cameras are watched 24 hours a day. I mean, this is the most restricted business that there is in the country. The most safest. This will be the safest facility in town. I promise you that.
Thank you.
Jeremy Stanulis, I'm the architect for Consume. So inside the facilities.
Please speak into the microphone.
Very clean. We spent a lot of money on millwork and finishes. Everything's very inviting. It's not a head shop. It's not Penny Lane. It's more like a retail facility. We spend upwards of $60,000 to $70,000 just on our reception desks and our merchandising. It's a very clean, very contemporary, inviting facility.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Vasily, he has some questions for Mr. Weber. Ma'am.
The young lady.
Okay.
I'm curious,
You're
some
gonna
of
state your name
Pam
again.
Mosan, some of you said you weren't upset about it in town because there's umpteen bars, and you've been through this. Alcohol has been around since the 1400s and stuff like that. This is something different, totally different, that the town has to deal with. Now, I know how bad the police department has in it with just drug dealers in town. How about the fentanyl problem at the high school? I mean, this is something that we're having a hard time dealing with it anyway. And now we have a dispensary. I can't believe the town doesn't have something. You have the industrial park on 173. You have lots that are for sale up and down 83 that are far enough away from subdivisions or schools and everything else. Why can't they be bought? There's got to be an area for 1,000 feet. It was set by the village, 1,000 feet, or by the state or whatever. Why does there have to be a variance? That is my question. I know alcohol's been here and you think it's okay to deal with that, but this is something totally different.
Thank you. Mr. Vasily.
Mr. Weber, could you
Mr.
come back
Weber.
up? Thanks. Obviously, you're still under oath. Mr. Weber, you may not know this, but the first 2 meetings, the regularly scheduled meetings provided the same meeting schedule occurs for 2024 would be February the 7th, 2024 and January the 3rd, 2024. Just make sure that's in the record. because we are talking about 6 months date here. Mr. Weber, you heard the statements made by Miss Mozan, right? And Miss Close, sorry, thank you. Sorry about that. And Miss Darcy, and I know that's her first name, so I apologize, right? Okay. So you understand their concerns, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And you said that we were talking about a special use, but this is actually our variance hearing, right? And we'll talk about, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then you do understand that we'll be talking about special uses possibly later, correct?
Correct.
All right. Based upon the concerns of Miss Close, I get it right that time? And Miss Mozan, you're willing to put up a landscaping and fencing with the evergreens in back between their properties, correct?
I have no issue with it. Is the developer nodded said he has no issues with it, so yes.
Okay. And would that mean leaving the oaks too? I don't know much about trees, but it seems like the oaks are bigger and
Mr. Sunday?
I think it'd be appropriate that allow staff, I mean, I literally have worked on hundreds of landscape plans,
Yeah.
to work with Mr. Sunday on a permanent landscape plan, which I think there's a balance that I think we would like to preserve the mature trees. There may be some gaps where we could add some additional landscaping. I don't think it's either or.
Okay. So, but there would be a landscaping plan that would incorporate some factors of the oaks or whatever is there now, plus new and maybe even better trees or
Correct.
foliage. Okay.
I think there's opportunity before it goes to the village board, subject to being support or recommendation that Mr. Sunday, the owner of the property, work with staff on the landscape plan for that buffer area to hopefully address some of the concerns of the residents.
And Mr. Weber, you would accept that as a condition to any grant that's here?
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And you would accept a condition on this grant that would be a 6 months transition from the temporary to the permanent,
Yes.
acknowledging that the first two dates are January the 3rd, 2024, if we do have that meeting, and February the 7th, 2024 of the next year for around the 6 month date.
Yes.
Okay. And you do understand that if we do grant the variance here, or if this board does recommend the variance, that it essentially without a recommendation or an approval of the special use permit, the variance would be null and void. It would be useless without there.
That's correct.
And you would accept that as a condition as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would you accept conditions on the temporary variance if it went through that you would apply for within 3 months as all necessary site plans for the permanent facility?
Yes.
And then 6 months to start construction, evidenced by building permits being issued on that property?
Yes.
Okay. So those would be conditions that you would accept and you would have no problem with.
No problem. Yes, I accept those.
And again, I just want to make sure we're very clear. You heard their concerns about the buffering, because by the way the crow flies, it's less than 1,000 feet.
Yes.
Okay. Is that okay, Madam Chair?
Pam Mozan, I have a question. When this building at nighttime and everybody's gone, or are you going to have security guards there at night? Because the ones in Chicago are being broken into and stuff being stolen. What are you guys doing? And that's when we have to be concerned, is when everybody's gone home, the pot is still in the stores. Are there going to be security guards there 24 hours, or at least at nighttime, overnight, protecting the store, us? Because if they run out and the police are on 83, they run through the woods, they're at my house. What is going to be done about that?
So there is not security guards that are at the facility 24 hours. When the security guards leave for the night, obviously the facility, I don't want to get too far into the construction of the building, but there's security protocols that per the state that we have to follow to protect the product. There's multiple entrances that need to be that somebody would have to get through in order to get to the product, but the facility is monitored 24 hours a day by connected to the state police, and obviously the burglar alarm and the fire alarm are connected directly to the Antioch facilities. So very secure. There's been maybe 2 burglaries that I know of in the state of Illinois since the whole program started. So they're very secure facilities.
Mr. Turner.
Just one more item for Mr.
Sure.
Weber. Just, you had referenced as Mr. Vasily was running through those things, you had referenced that you want to get out of the temporary as fast as possible.
Absolutely.
Okay, so just as the day the building opens, the permanent building, that would be removed within how many days?
As soon as we disconnect electric and, get all the connections taken off as soon as possible. Yeah.
Okay. It may just maybe I don't know, 30 days, whatever, something in writing just for, obviously people in the audience, they don't want to see a temporary building sitting there for X amount of period of time, using it for, extra storage, what have you.
The hopes would be that we would then use this trailer for another facility that's under construction, whether it's in this state or another state. So we plan on, it's a big investment for the trailer just to make it secure. We would want to remove it right away. We have a place where we can store it at. So yeah, 30 days would not be a problem at all.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion? All right, well, with that then, I'd like a motion.
I give you a motion for the variance of 23-07. Consume cannabis, Antioch. Consume cannabis, Antioch at 453 and 471 Main Street in the M1 zoning, light industrial. The variance for 700 feet with all conditions that have been discussed this evening. And the petitioner has accepted those, so that's my first.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Yes.
Yes.
Madigan,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Chairwoman Henning.
No. Okay. Then we move on to PZB 23-08. Consideration of a variance from the required 1,000 buffer between a daycare and, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, and cannabis dispensary related to the property commonly known as 417 East Illinois Route 173. PIN number 02-16-201-002.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairperson. Let the record reflect this is a public hearing be heard pursuant to public notice in accordance with all state statutes and applicable ordinances. Madam Chairperson, this matter comes before you again for a variance for the property commonly known as 417 East Route 173. The property is currently zone B2. As you recall, the applicant came at the last meeting for a special use for the property at 417 East Illinois. As you recall, this applicant was approved for a cannabis dispensary, the first cannabis dispensary in Antioch for 510 Main Street, based on their due diligence, based on their investigation of the construction renovation costs. They made a determination that that property was not economically viable. And based on that fact, they have worked with staff to find a new location. So the new location is at 417 East Route 173. For your recollection, it's a retail center located between the existing Myers, strike that Menards, located to the west, and the Walmart store to the east. It's an existing retail center, which is zone B2. That property, again, has an issue regards that it is within 1,000 feet of an existing daycare, which is located on Deep Lake Road, just south of the Aldi store. Based on that fact, the applicant is seeking a variance for less than 1,000 feet from their proposed store to the existing daycare facility, again, on Deep Lake Road. So for the record, it's always important to look at context. If you bear with me for 1 second. So as you can see the actual screen here, you can see the context. The area to the north is zoned residential, but the property surrounding the area is all commercial. So the area obviously to the east of the site is a Walmart, which is zone B2. The area to the west is the Menard store, which is B2. The area to the south is our individual commercial outlets, so B2. So generally, the characterization of the area is all commercial. There is extensive landscape buffering and retention to the north, so this property is not immediately adjacent to any residential. There's an extensive buffer between the overall PUD, the original PUD that was part of the Menard/Walmart development and the existing estate homes to the north. So in accordance with section 10.228, or any variance, if you've already gone through, the applicant must demonstrate certain findings of facts. First finding of fact is that the variance is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance. Again, for the record, I've already outlined that we have a requirement for 1,000-foot buffer for certain types of uses, which I've already highlighted, but specifically, there is a 1,000-foot buffer for daycares. The applicant is seeking relief of that limitation. As I've already highlighted, this proposed applicant is trying to minimize any negative impacts. As I've identified, there would be no negative impact. This is clearly, this proposed use variance would be in harmony with the general purposes of the proposed zoning ordinance. And the basis for that is, if you can look at actually the screen behind me, there's extensive commercial use, not only parking lots, but commercial outlets, Route 173, additional commercial development on the south side of 173, existing Aldi store, which buffer the existing daycare that's located on Deep Lake Road. So there's really, in our analysis, will be no negative impact on this daycare because of the commercial nature of 173, because of the commercial uses along 173. There's extensive, sufficient commercial buffering. So we do not believe that the daycare would have any type of a negative impact, or it would impact their property values, or in any way impact the safety of the children who use that facility for daycares. The second finding of fact is the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances, and thus the strict enforcement of the zoning ordinance would result in practical difficulties or impose exceptional hardships due to special and unusual conditions. Again, we would submit the strict enforcement of the 1,000-foot buffer would make it impossible for this applicant to proceed with the proposed cannabis dispensary in this retail center. And based on that fact, the variance is necessary for them to be allowed to proceed with their approximately 2,800 square foot store. As we all know, the subject site has an existing parcel line, which is located within 1,000 feet, and therefore the applicant does need relief. But there is nothing inherently unique about this lot configuration, nothing inherently unique or inherently a hardship that has not been created by the applicant's request for this proposed use. So there's no, it's really a self-imposed hardship. So the applicant, there's no unique hardship on this case. The third finding of fact is property cannot yield a reasonable use and permitted only under these conditions. Again, the subject property has several commercial uses within it. So clearly, if the applicant did not proceed with their proposed cannabis facility, there would still be an opportunity by the owner of this building to attract commercial users. The fourth variance requirement is the variance of granted will not alter the essential character of the locality of the area. It will not be a substantial detriment. Again, based on our analysis, there's nothing to indicate that there will be any type of negative impact on any properties adjacent to this site. There would be no negative externalities as a result. This proposed 2,800 square foot cannabis in an approximately 9,000 square foot commercial building. As we already outlined, this proposed use is really inherently a commercial use. Generally, with its use is consistent with any other commercial use in any other retail center in the village of Antioch. So based on that fact, based on the existing character of the 173 corridor, we do not believe that this proposed use would have any type of negative impact on the central commercial character of the Route 173 corridor. So that concludes our analysis of the findings of facts for this proposed use. As highlighted above, the applicant has an existing special use for a cannabis dispensary. The one unique aspect is that this owner of this proposed business does have an existing special use for an existing cannabis facility. They've made it quite clear, which I think is implicit in this proposal that they have no wish or desire to proceed with their cannabis facility at 510 Main Street. So staff is requesting that, subject to the recommendation and finally the village board's approval, that a stipulation will be added that concurrent with final board approval of this proposed cannabis dispensary, the applicant would submit voluntarily a letter agreeing to rescind their existing special use for the facility at 510 Main Street. That would allow the village to proceed with a formal ordinance to rescind that special use. That special use, as you know, is still outstanding. So staff did want to address that one issue. So overall, we are making a favorable recommendation this evening with the one additional stipulation pursuant to a letter of rescission concurrent with village board approval of this proposed cannabis dispensary. With that, Mr. Scales, representative of the applicant, is actually here this evening to answer any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that the planning commission has.
Thank you, Mr. Garrigan. Mr. McCarty?
Previously, we discussed that this facility would possibly have
A lounge in it also, or is this one just gonna be a dispensary?
Just a dispensary. We cut the lounge out a while ago.
The state requirements for you to be in a retail center for keeping your product enclosed and safe from the public's hands would be taken care of also within that space?
Correct.
I have no further questions.
Ms. Carstensen?
No questions.
Ms. Madigan?
No questions.
Mr. Turner?
I have no questions.
I would just like to state that the fact that there's a childcare center within that 1,000 feet, but it's really surrounded by all businesses. I feel a little different on this one than I would on the other, where we back up to residential. And so I just wanted to make that statement clear. Mr. Vasili?
Could I just, Mr. Garrigan, Mr. Scales, correct?
Correct.
This, obviously the variance would be of no effect if the special use wasn't granted later. You agree to that?
Correct.
Okay. And then you would agree to 6 months for site plan, or sorry, 3 months for site plan approval, 6 months for commencement of construction?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Garrigan, you're fine with that, right? All right.
And I'd like to point out that actually this facility, for the measuring of the 1,000 feet buffer, it's property line to property line. So the property line of the daycare center is 855 feet from the property line of the shopping center. So, and that's why we need the variance. When I came previously, the way I read the ordinance, it was property line of the daycare center to the actual line of the facility, the front door of the facility. And we are over the 1,000 feet with this property to the facility from the daycare property line. I believe we're closer to 1,100 feet, somewhere right around that. So if we're measuring from, variance in that way, we are still outside that buffer zone. And our other option for this, instead of getting a variance, but it was a lengthier process and a costlier process, was to actually just cut the property that's currently there and subdivide it. And then we would be in compliance with your ordinance. But this was the path of least resistance, and that's why we're going for the variance at this point.
Okay. Mr. McCarty, you have another question?
So the time frame for both of these are within 6 months to have construction.
Well, we would be in our final location within 5 months is what we would hope for from approval.
Okay. just a food for thought for the board and possibly the village to think about is maybe putting a moratorium on cannabis dispensaries within the village after the two. To see them get to their open state, see how they're working within the village, see how people are reacting, see how it's working for our community.
So that actually brings up another issue. When we got our first special use, there was only one license allowed in Antioch. And that's why we were drawn to Antioch. We got the same thing in Richmond. We got the same thing in Whitman Harbor. We've got the same thing up in the States. That's the way that, the reason we actually came to the town is when Mr. Garrigan contacted us and we started this process, that this was a one dispensary town. I think that if you're going to give two licenses, and we've got to compete, I think we foul out at this point. We've looked at the numbers. I mean, as Mr. Weber said, in Michigan, you have 3 or 4 dispensaries in the town, they're already closing. So we definitely don't want to set ourselves up to failure. We don't want the legs knocked up under us from, the beginning. So that it would change our opinion on opening in Antioch to add a second dispensary.
Well, with that being said, I'm wondering if you just go through the process with one group and see what's going to happen here. And then they can decide if they want to come back in. I mean, how does that work?
Well, I mean, procedurally, we're talking about the variance. I mean, right now, we're talking about the variance. We're not
That's what
talking about, we're not talking about, oddly enough, item PZB
Right.
2309 is the numbers. This is the variance for the location off of 173. Madam Chair, I just don't know if you want to keep to one issue at a time.
Oh, I agree with you on that, but then we're coming,
Yeah, next.
what, Mr. Carr?
One other question, the zoning for this, it all fits within the zoning for the cannabis. Yep. Okay.
But when we're talking about, going down the step, I mean,
Correct, but we haven't had a vote on it.
nothing.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. All right.
So I'll
So
make a motion.
does anyone else have any? Mr. Turner, Ms. Madigan, Mr. McCarty? Okay. Yes, do we have a motion?
So I will make a motion for PZB 23-8, the variance regarding the 1,000 buffer between the daycare and cannabis dispensary, commonly known as 417 East Illinois Route 173, to approve the variance.
And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call.
McCarty?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Madigan?
Yes.
Sarno?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We are going to take a 5-minute recess. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so the meeting is back in session. Thank you all for being patient. Mr. Garrigan?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairperson. Let the
We have a-
record reflect this is a public hearing being heard for public in accordance with state statute and applicable ordinances. Madam Chairperson, this matter comes before you for a proposed tax amendment. As you recall, there was some discussion at the last planning commission about whether the village, in fact, as part of the cannabis ordinance, which was approved back in 2019, whether it makes sense to address, instead of requiring applicants to come in for a variance, which we just had two applicants come through the process for a variance for the 1,000-foot buffer, is to modify the proposed ordinance, specifically modify the 1,000-foot buffer. As you've heard testimony this evening and based on some staff research, multiple villages have different policies as it relates to buffers. Some villages have, the city of Yorkville has a 500-foot buffer. We've heard some villages have a 250-foot buffer. We've had a 1,000-foot buffer since we adopted this ordinance. So staff is not making a recommendation this evening about whether we should modify buffer requirement. We're not proposing an actual alternative number. I just wanted to very briefly bring this up for general discussion. Or is the board, I'm sorry, is the commission very comfortable with handling variances on a case-by-case basis and not modifying the ordinance? So that's the first section, and that's specifically for the record, is 10-19-7 of the village's municipal code, which is part of the zoning ordinance, that regulates the 1,000-foot buffers from the facilities that we've already discussed tonight, i.e. daycares, schools, etc. The second aspect of this proposed tax amendment, as you've heard from an applicant this evening, as we speak right now, section 10-19-13-B, we do limit certain dispensaries. We limit right now cannabis dispensaries to one. The question is, does it make sense for the village to support in the future two dispensaries? We would have to modify this section of the ordinance to allow two dispensaries. And right now we limit to one. So again, staff is looking for input, excuse me, of whether there be support to modify that section. So with that, I'll conclude my staff report. If there is support, we're looking for a modification of the 1,000-foot buffer requirement and an increase from our current ordinance from one cannabis dispensary to two. And with that, I'll conclude my staff report.
Mr. McCarty.
I'm comfortable with addressing the variances one at a time as they come across, as it gives us control and an opportunity to address each one of the unique situations that arise on each one of the proposals that comes before us. As far as the number from 1 to 2, I think both of these locations have a different needs and different areas of distribution for the village. One's 173 corridor that runs from here all the way out to Twin Lakes. A lot of people will be traveling that direct route, and 83 is right on the border. So you're gonna have people coming over from the border. You have people coming from close in town that don't want to go out to a commercial setting to hit. And it's a unique place to have a cannabis shop. So I don't have a problem with 2. I have a problem with 3. I have a problem with 4. I have a problem with 5. I just want to see the 2, if we're going to have it, that they become successful and open up their doors and follow through with what they say they're going to do. And we have a good use within the community and a good working relationship with them.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Karstensen?
How did we entertain 2 if it's not part of our?
Well, I think I'll defer to our attorney, but we have the opportunity to consider these. We just can't technically take final board approval until we technically modify the ordinance. So that's my interpretation.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Garrigan. So we had the one, they said they weren't going forward on that site. So then now we have 2, they're both here tonight. And they both received a variance to go forward, relief relative to the 1,000-foot buffer from daycare related facility.
I'm not an expert in this, but wouldn't we have to redo all of this language? Because I don't imagine that there would be one of each of these types. Do you know what I'm saying? There wouldn't be one craft grower, one dispensing, one infuser. I mean, I would imagine that places would want multiple abilities. Do you know what I'm saying? Like this language is just.
I think that when you'll recall, when the cannabis ordinance was approved, my recollection was there was a discussion about the number of these different types of uses.
Right.
And there was a general consensus at least at that time, that the board was comfortable with that number. So, and I think, can't speak for the board, but they still theoretically would maybe only be comfortable with one craft grower or,
Yeah, let me re-ask the question. Maybe I
don't think I
think
understood it.
maybe you get what I'm saying. So there would only be one of these line items. Am I understanding that correctly? There would be either a craft grower and nothing else. Or it's saying you could have a craft grower, you could have a dispensing organization.
No, the village says you could allow one cannabis dispensary, one craft grower. I mean, there would be one.
So
for
there
each
could be
category.
4, but they could only fall
Under that
individually in
Correct.
each category.
Correct.
Isn't that odd? No? Okay.
Typically, you don't have dispensaries coupled with craft or with growing.
I don't know that that's true.
We have an expert here.
That'd be good.
Luckily, you do have an expert here. Each one of those is a separate license that's issued
Okay.
from the
Okay.
state, so they cannot be co-located like that.
Okay. I want to make sure if we're changing this, then we're,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Mr. McCarty. I guess, yeah, I want to review these each time, but we're limiting it to 2, so I don't know if that would matter anyway.
Ms. Madigan.
So I have, I guess probably two questions. So I agree with, both the previous commissioners. I mean, I think two could do business in our town. I mean, look at how many bars we have and they don't seem to be going under, so. But I do have another question regarding it because, based on, what Commissioner Carsonson said as well is, so if we're allowing one of each of these currently, the different business permitted. So based on a conversation, my understanding is that under the dispensing organization, it also would not just be a dispensary, but also consumption. Am I? No, I know. I'm just saying, not now. I'm not saying that now. I'm just saying, under these business permitted uses where we have one, where would consumption fit into? Dispensary. So if we approve two, and we currently have two dispensaries, if somebody came in and wanted to do consumption, we would have to look at this text amendment again to allow for consumption. Am I understanding that correctly?
It would have to be part and parcel of an application for dispensary
Okay,
consumption. And made in both applicants, for the record here, have made it quite clear they're not proceeding with consumption.
okay, no, and I understand that. I'm just saying, because again, in the future, if someone comes in and not necessarily these two applicants, but another applicant comes in and wants to do a consumption business, it would then have to be relooked at again if we only approve two at this time.
Correct.
Okay. My other question related to that is, because we do have two that now have both variances approved, and I understand what you stated earlier, that we do, the gentleman in the back regarding the property that is currently seek the variance, and later we'll discuss a special use for 417, or I lied on that, but the 417 East Illinois Route 173. That special use is for the old packing house building, which would have to be relinquished.
Yes, that needs to be current. There needs to be a rescission, or it needs to be final board approval to rescind that special use.
Okay, so now because we have two applicants that now have been approved for a variance and essentially are looking to obviously move forward with this, how do you look at the order in which those are approved? So the reason I'm asking this is because if we stick with one, how do you determine which applicant gets that one? Is there a process in place for that?
So I'm not sure if I understand your question. I mean, there'll be a village board's final determination to make a determination which one gets the special use. Understand what I'm saying?
So it's not by when they applied for something, it's not, I mean, we don't
No.
take it in.
It's a prerogative of the village board.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Turner.
I would say that I agree mainly with the rest of the board here. I like the case by case scenario with 1,000 feet. And in terms of the going from one to two, I'm struggling a little bit with it because I think that knowing the town and where we're at, I support the two where they're being positioned, you know, the 173 corridor and the 83 corridor. I don't like to drive across town to go to the bank. It's a total pain in the butt, you know, but that said, if you were to tell me tomorrow that they're going to be across the street from each other, like on the 83 corridor, to me, that wouldn't make sense. And I would like to see them up and operational and see some numbers coming through to support where we're at. So that's kind of where I stand. I think two makes sense with where they are positioned today, and I'd be okay with it.
Okay, so I am good with keeping the 1,000 foot and having the variance. And I feel that one is enough. Although I can see I'm outnumbered here, and that's okay because that's democracy. So I think the coming in for variances is a good thing, and I am in favor of one. Any further discussion? Do we need a motion? Right? Denise, do we need a
Yeah,
motion?
and we do need I mean, let's seeing, would the board entertain a motion to split the questions? The first one being the proposal to recommend to the village board that we do away with the 1,000-foot municipal buffer. And the second being the number of licensures for the dispensary organizations in the village.
I
Would the
would
board be okay with that?
I'd be okay with splitting the question.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do we need a motion? So sorry to get all Robert's rules on everybody, but we need a motion for that to split the question. And then we have to take up each individual substantive question.
Would that be like PZB 2309 A and B?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would make a motion to keep the 1,000-foot buffer PZB.
Well, we need to split it. We need a motion
We
to
need to
split
split
it.
it?
Yeah, yes. we
Motion
need
is
a
split.
real motion to split it.
Motion to split the question.
Second.
Hardy,
Yes.
Parkinson.
Yes.
Madigan. Yes. Turner.
Yes.
Yes.
So now the question's split. So let's call it PZB 23-9A regarding 1,000-foot buffer.
I'll make a motion for PZB 23-09, regarding the 1,000-foot buffer.
And it's a keep it in place.
Keep it in place.
Second.
Hardy,
Yes.
Yes.
Madigan.
Yes.
Turner.
Yes.
Yes.
You want me to do it or you want?
Oh, no, I want you to do it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So PZB 23-09B would be the number of licensures for a dispensary only. This does not have an effect on the recommendation, does not have an effect on transportation, infusion, or craft grows, only on dispensaries. And I thought that the motion was from 1 to 2 and only 2. I heard many people say no more than 2 multiple times. Yes. So that would be 2309B would be raising from 1 to 2 for dispensaries only.
I'll make a motion on PZB 23-09B to move to allowing for 2 licenses for the dispensary, from 1.
Second.
Hardy,
Yes.
Parkinson.
Yes.
Madigan.
Yes.
Turner.
Just confirm, I'm sorry.
Yep.
No more than 2.
No more than 2.
Yes.
Henning.
No. Okay. Motion carries. Now we move on to, let's see, do I have a PZB in here? 2305, yes, PZB 2305, special use for cannabis dispensary, 417 East Illinois Route 173, Antioch.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairperson. Again, for the record, this is a special use for the property for commonly known as 417. Let the record reflect this is a continuation of a public hearing that was held at the last meeting. So I'm going to go just discuss this very briefly. As you recall, I went through the findings of facts the last meeting for this requested special use. And for the record, I would just reiterate that the findings of facts that that I formally went through at the last meeting are the same. Staff very briefly did not believe or actually believed that there would be no negative injurious impact on the enjoyment of other properties based on the inherent commercial character of this area. We also determined that there would be the establishment of the special use will not impede the normal continuing orderly development. There's nothing to indicate that this proposed use would in any way impede continued attraction of new commercial development along the Route 173 corridor. So staff did formally go through the findings at the last meeting. It's reflected in the minutes. So we would concur that nothing has changed and we still find that the applicant has met the 2 required findings of facts for a special use. As it relates to parking, we did a full analysis of the parking. We walked through the landscape plan. So at this point, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that that the planning commission has as it relates to this proposed special use.
Mr. McCarty,
No questions.
Ms. Carstensen,
No questions.
Ms. Madigan,
No questions.
Mr. Turner,
No more questions.
nor do I. So with that, I would need a motion.
I'll make a motion. PZB 23-05 for the consideration of the special use for operation of a cannabis dispensary at a property located at 417 East Illinois Route 173, Suites 106 and 107. I motion to approve that with the stipulation that the current special use that is in place at the Antioch Packing House gets rescinded.
Okay,
Second.
McCarty?
Yes.
Carstens?
Yes.
Madigan?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Henning?
yes. Okay. Let's move on. To 2306, special use for cannabis dispensary, 453 Main Street.
Again, let the record reflect that this is a continuation of a public hearing being heard pursuant to public notice in accordance with state statutes. Again, this matter is a continuation of the property, a special use or property commonly known as 453. As I recall, 453 was proposed by a cannabis consume cannabis for the permanent facility for the 9,000 square foot building. Staff did go through the findings of facts again for this proposed 4,920 square foot building. For the record, the first finding, we did not believe that this proposed use would have any type of negative impact on the enjoyment of the properties adjacent to this property, and it was clearly consistent with the trend of development along the Route 83 corridor. There is nothing to in any way to indicate that there would be a negative impact on surrounding commercial properties or light industrial properties specifically, or as we have previously stated, with the single family homes adjacent to this site, subject to the proposed landscaping improvements, subject to the fencing that we've already discussed. For as it relates to the second finding of fact, there's nothing to indicate that this proposed establishment of the special use will impede in any way the normal and orderly development of this corridor. We do believe that with this proposed new investment, this new proposed building, that will provide a new opportunity to seek additional investment along the Route 83 corridor. We believe that this will be the first step in trying to rejuvenate and bring new investment along this corridor itself. As it relates to the actual parking and landscape plan, I did walk through all those findings. We do believe in sum and substance that there's adequate parking for the permanent facility, using even a more restrictive analysis. And with regards to the landscaping plan, we did walk the planning commission through the landscape plan at the last meeting. Subject to addition, we, as we discussed tonight, one new additions, we'll be working with the owner of the property to add some additional, come up with a new landscape plan along the eastern perimeter of property adjacent to the single family homes, incorporating the existing mature trees and along with some new landscaping. So we'll have that landscape plan hopefully for the village board consideration. So with that, we are making favorable recommendation this evening for the property commonly known as, for the record, 453 Main Street for a special use.
Thank you, Mr. Garrigan. Mr. McCarty?
I have no questions.
Ms. Carstensen?
No questions.
Ms. Madigan?
Michael, can you just clarify for me? I'm sorry. So the one we're looking at right now is 453. The one below it has the same number, but it's for 471.
That's a typo. So
Okay,
it's
so
just
the-
453.
But the 453 is the property that the temporary,
No.
No.
I'm sorry, it's
Okay.
confusing. 453 is for the
the
permanent home, the
Okay.
9,000 square foot building. Applicant will be taking approximately 4,900 square feet of that.
Okay,
So that is the address. So that's what we're considering, the permanent home of consume cannabis.
okay, so then the one below it is 470?
There will be an additional public hearing for the temporary one, yes, which is 471.
Okay, all right, perfect. Okay, thank you. No other question.
Mr. Turner?
Yeah, I just quick comment, just Michael in general, I think that obviously we heard a lot tonight. This is new. This is, to the community. There's a lot of concern around it. So I think we just really need to do the right thing with the landscaping buffer. There's been other scenarios where we've wanted certain landscaping buffers, like i.e. in front of the police department, that there is no landscaping buffer there. And I know that maybe that was not within our control, but just make sure that I'm just saying for public record here, I want to make sure that that's done in the proper way and make sure that, while maybe that the group that was here tonight will not be happy no matter what, but it might make it a little bit easier to accept. So that's all.
I totally agree with you, Mr. Turner. I have no comment. So with that, we need a motion.
I'll make a motion. PZB 23-06, consideration of a special use for the operation of a cannabis dispensary at the property commonly known as 453 Main Street. To approve it. Special use.
I'll make a second.
Cardy,
Yes.
Parkinson,
Yes.
Madigan,
Yes.
Turner,
Yes.
Henning.
No. Okay. What can I say, guys? Okay, I think, we need one more. Oh,
But we don't have the. Oh, no, we don't have an immediate one.
okay. So, PZB 2306, consideration of a special use for the operation of a cannabis dispensary at the property commonly known as 471 Main Street.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairperson. For the record, let the record reflect that this is actually a new case being heard in accordance with public notice in accordance with all state statutes and applicable ordinances. Madam Chairperson, this case is coming before you for a special use for a temporary trailer. Because this is a temporary dispensary, we believe in consultation with the applicant and their counsel that it does require a separate special use. So therefore, we will go through the findings of fact that's required for a special use. For the record, this property is commonly known as 471 on Main Street. There is an existing commercial building located there. The building has an existing access point on Route 83. The first phase of this proposed project, the applicant has identified, is planning to construct or install a 12 by 40 square foot trailer, approximately 640 square feet, will be located behind the existing commercial building. Excuse me. Special use is required for any type of cannabis dispensary, whether it's permanent or temporary. So whenever considering a special use, it's important to look at the context of the area. As I've already discussed, the general area is all light industrial. So I won't spend a lot of time talking about the context. We've discussed the context extensively tonight, but generally for the record, the area is light industrial and the proposed use is generally consistent with the overall character. In accordance with 10-2-12, the first finding of facts for a special use is the special use will not be injurious to the use of, or employment of enjoyment of the properties in the immediate area for the purposes already permitted or substantially diminished property values. Based on what's being proposed here, a temporary trailer based on existing commercial use, there's nothing to indicate that this proposed temporary trailer would have any negative impact on the surrounding uses. There's nothing to indicate that this would have any way impede continued commercial development along the corridor. Second finding of fact, the establishment of special use will not impede normal and orderly development of the area. Excuse me, as highlighted in my report for 53 Main Street, there's nothing to indicate this is not consistent with the trend of development. There's nothing to indicate that this proposed temporary trailer would have any negative impact on our ability to continue to attract new investment to the corridor. As it relates to the proposed parking area, there will be 34 parking spaces. The actual spaces do comply with the village's required parking dimensions. There'll be a 20-foot drive aisle. There would be a specific new construction of a sidewalk to this site itself. There would be a handicap ramp. So the applicant would be complying with the village's parking ordinance as it relates to number of parking spaces. Excuse, thank you, that helps. It would be, would comply with the number of parking spaces, also comply with all the village's requirements as it relates to handicap access to the trailer itself. There will also be a new trash enclosure that would be constructed to this area itself. So some of the substance, there'll be 13 new parking spaces to the overall site plan. With that, we are making a favorable recommendation of the special use with the 2 stipulations as outlined in my staff report. So with that, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions the planning commission has. We do have a site plan. I can walk you through this actual site plan of this proposed trailer if there's any questions.
I'd like to definitely see the site plan.
So you can see in the site plan itself, you have the actual commercial building, which is an existing commercial building on this subject site. I think there's a existing currently retail store in that building. The trailer will be located along the northeastern perimeter of this corner property. You can see there's an existing access on Route 83. Not only is there additional parking in front of the existing commercial building, but there would be additional parking behind the existing commercial building. You can see the number of total spaces. There is a drive aisle that would generally be sufficient with regards to width. It does comply with the village's requirement for a 20-foot for 24-foot wide drive aisle. So as it relates to parking, the proposed temporary trailer based on the size, 640 square feet, would require 34 parking spaces. I'm sorry, would incorporate 34 parking spaces. Based on a ratio of 1 space per 150 square feet, which is twice the number of a retail space, a total of 4 spaces would be required. So based on the strict analysis of our parking ordinance, the applicant has substantially more parking than is required by the village's, retail analysis, which is 1 space per 300. Even you go to sit-down restaurants, 1 space per 150 square feet, there will still be more parking than be required. So with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that relates to parking.
Mr. McCarty.
The blue trailer that's shown on the site plan, to the left of that and a little to the north is the garbage enclosure.
Mr. Weber, maybe answer these questions.
That'd be great.
Yes, that's secured garbage.
Okay. One thing that came up in our discussion tonight with the residents was security and a fence. So if we could connect a temporary fence from that enclosure to behind your facility, more towards where there is a pond, to stop people from passing through towards their direction of the back end of the property, could be helpful. And possibly closing off from that closure to your other fence that you're going to do around your construction site, again, limiting people or traffic from going behind your temporary facility. I think that would help alleviate some of their concerns with keeping people towards this side of the retail temporary site. That's all I have.
Ms. Carstensen?
Just a question, do we need a date on this as well?
Based on the conditions set forth.
Just so that there's not two.
That's right.
Operating two.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to bring that up, and I think Michael asked if we only address the parking now, but yeah, I agree. So if we could put a pin in that and then come back to it, because, yeah.
That's it.
Ms. Madigan?
I don't have any.
Mr. Turner?
Just for clarification, Michael, in the packets that you sent over, the photometric layout, is that this parking lot here or this scenario?
It does incorporate both scenarios. So there will be obviously a permanent photometric plan for the permanent building and a temporary for this building.
Understood. All right. Well, thank you for sharing. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, I have no comment, so we need to, do you want to go back?
Well,
to
is this
that?
just on the parking? Yeah, this is just on the parking,
Just on the
right?
parking?
Yeah.
This is not on the special use of a cannabis site,
This
temporary
is-
use?
No, this is a special use. So we just discussed parking as part of the special use. So if we want to incorporate
Question.
the question about the 6 months, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Then we would probably add a stipulation that makes sense. We're consistent across the board.
Mhm.
So,
Agree.
so that stipulation would be, for the record, would be additional 6 months for the removal of the trailer, right? Or right?
No, for the
No,
use.
just Use,
For
use.
the use.
Yeah.
Additional 2 months for the removal after the use is come,
One- the third-
1 month, 30 days? Okay, 30 days.
Yeah.
And that would be added to this?
Mhm.
Yeah, so the
Right,
two-
that's the third
Special use.
stipulation.
so Michael, it would be so 453 and 471 would never coexist.
Correct.
That's correct.
Right. And then it would expire on its own terms. All other things aside, within 6 months, at the maximum.
Or they would come before us for an extension?
They can come, right.
Okay.
And then, right.
And one other thing, the applicant agrees to the idea of the fencing to help keep people out in front of the property?
Yes, that's a stipulation. I'll work with, obviously, the developer. We'll come up with a plan to make everyone happy.
Okay.
So I would need a motion
Well,
for,
I'll make a motion.
okay,
So I'll make a motion for well, we need to update. So PZB 23, it would be 07. Consideration of a special use for the operation of a cannabis dispensary at the property commonly known as 471 Main Street on a temporary basis that would expire at the same time frame as the construction. And it would have to come before us again for an extension for the 6 months, right, if necessary. And that they will not operate 2 dispensaries at the same time at 453 and 471 Main Street.
Including the
The-
fencing that
yes.
we discussed and all others?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, the stipulation regarding the.
I'll
fence.
second that.
McCarty?
Yes.
Parkinson?
Yes.
Madigan?
Yes.
Turner?
Yes.
Kenny?
yes. I think that's it, right? Anything else? Okay. All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.